Hi, my name is Dustin LeBlanc, and I am a foster parent. Me and my husband recently got placed with a 13-year-old boy from Helping Hand Home. His story's a bit similar to Christopher, as far as he has been in the system since he was 9, and basically just lived in the RTC the entire time until we got him in our home. So that is why I'm here. We're not sure yet if our son is anything other than straight. He's not sure yet either, so we'll figure that out as things go. But yep, that's why I'm here.
Hi, my name is Denise Hyde. I'm an attorney in Austin. I actually work throughout the state, but primarily in the Central Texas area. Work with people like this lady next to me and with all the agencies that are here. I used to represent a lot of kiddos in Child Protective Services cases as their attorney ad litem, and sometimes parents as well. But my practice now is primarily working with foster and adoptive families and sometimes relative families as well that are either intervening in CPS cases or working through the foster system or getting ready to adopt and adopting. Oh, you got one.
Hi, I'm Megan Carvajal. I am practicing this because it's part of my daily job. I am a white female who identifies as a lesbian. I have a daughter who was adopted through the foster care system. Denise is our attorney. We are about to have her 13-year-old sister placed with us. Denise will also be our attorney. So I'm going to take a minute with this. 6 years ago when we were placed with our first child, I think this is important to note, my wife and I were legally married in New York, but it was not recognized in Texas. And so when Denise did our adoption, I was the only one who could adopt. And my wife is not on the birth certificate, and that still hurts. Denise also had to file to have my last name changed legally because Texas would not allow it to happen based on my marriage certificate. So our experience this time around will be much different. Pathway was our first agency, and Bear is our second agency. Is that it?
That's good.
And let's get her on the birth certificate. Okay, so call me. We're just going to do business, y'all.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Aaron Oser. I'm with the Pelton Children's Center. I'm representing one of the many agencies here that we're child placing agencies. So children that are coming into the system, we find homes for them.
And I'm Destiny Olson, and I'm also with a child placing agency, the Bear Foundation, here in town. And I got into this because my husband and I were house parents at a children's home for 10 years prior to this, and so that hands-on experience and love for kids and wanting to go about doing things differently and like being able to teach parents how to walk that walk in a better way was my motivation. And so that's why I'm here. And I also am a proud parent of a non-binary and queer youth.
So you started a little bit, I mean, you've shared I'm sorry, Megan, yeah, you shared a little bit about your experience. I was going to say,
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your experience as were you both foster and adoptive parents?
So the first time around, it was, right out, like, it was the first time exploring anything, and I didn't want to do anything other than match adoption because I knew my heart couldn't stand the risk of losing a kid.
Can you tell people what a match adoption is?
Yeah, and so match adoption in parent terms means that the children are legally free to be adopted. So the birth parent rights have been completely terminated, and CPS they're ready to be placed in a home for adoption. This time around, her sister is in foster care, so we are foster to adopt. Is that right? And while we don't foresee any reason why an adoption wouldn't happen, we have a more supportive environment because she is foster care, and we're going to receive the services that she needs in a more purposeful way. So, yeah.
Do you think is the process different because you're dealing with a sibling?
The process is different because the level at which this child is in the system. As you go through this process, you will learn that children are they're labeled in all kinds of different ways. And our daughter was what our adoption agency called a unicorn. Really no problems, very well adjusted. She came into our home and was just like she'd always been there. She got really lucky from the circumstance that she was in. Her sister has had a much harder time. So she needs more supportive services. And so the experience is very different. But it's actually, because she needs more support, we're experiencing love and support from so many other people and in different ways. Like from Bear and from my coworker Anna, and it is a different experience, but it's just as wonderful.
Dustin, I saw your eyes perk up when she said the word kids are being labeled.
Yes.
Can you talk a little, I mean, so how does that fit in, or talk about some of the challenges that you have faced when you're trying to adopt?
Well, they give kids labels of different levels of care, and that's basic, moderate, specialized, and then extremely specialized. And you don't really, you get these labels, and before you meet the kids, and then you meet the kid, and you're like, oh, well, they seem perfectly fine, or, oh, I see why they have this label. And I understand the need for it, but at the same time, it does kind of give you a little bit of a preconceived notion of how the kids are going to be, or a lot of people get that way about the kids. And our son was labeled as moderate care, and to be honest, I don't think he really needs that label. Most of his issues, if you will, were kind of from being institutionalized and living in this home setting, not in an actual home for 4 years. But he did have some adjustment issues when he moved in, but for the most part, I think that though the labels do help, they also are a little detrimental as well.
Can I follow up? So I just want to clarify a point that the state has a process by which they label children based on what's on paper and what the environments they are in are reporting back. But that is why having a child placement agency is so important, because they help you understand that. They are really interested in getting to know the child as the child, not just what it says on paper. And so it helps you understand that label. I remember we looked at a child who we weren't sorting by specialized, and so we didn't see like some of the children that could have been placed with us the first time around. And one of the children, I later saw her, and she was labeled as specialized because she was deaf. But she was incredibly well-rounded. And so you have to get an agency to help you kind of figure these things out, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah, and I will say that the agency I've gone through, Helping Hand Home, was very good about that, because me and my husband went into this not wanting to get a kid over 3 years old. But of course, through the process, through the process, everything changes as you start doing getting all the training and doing all the observation hours, and we fell in love with this. At the time he was 12, 12-year-old boy. But that was one of the things, oh, well, he's moderate level care, you have to do more training for this. And like I said, as we were going through the training and getting to know this kid, I'm like, well, it doesn't seem all that different from any other kid. So she's right. They were very good about explaining, get to know him, don't worry about the whole moderate thing. That was a very helpful thing that the agency helped us with.
So for the two of you, did you or your husband and you or your wife, did you encounter any hurdles or challenges because of your sexual orientation?
Yes, actually. So we wanted a sibling group, and we found a sibling group in Houston, and we were warned, don't look at kids in Houston, because it is really hard for same-sex couples to adopt in Houston. Now, this was 6 years ago. Things may have changed at this point, but there was a sibling group. We submitted our home study. The caseworker, the CPS caseworker, really liked us, and so we went on a call to talk to, you get on this, I don't know what is it a staffing call? So it was CPS caseworker, their supervisor, our pathway caseworker, the two of us, and then the attorney ad litem, and then the CASA. And I just want to say that this is not representative of any one organization when I talk about this situation, but we were doing really well, and these kids were going to be placed with us on this call. Everybody was gung-ho, and then they asked the CASA what they thought. And this woman said, this isn't going to work. The kids have told me that they want a mother and a father. And and she said, and that is what I will be recommending to the judge. And, you know, kids in care, maybe it's changed again, but 6 years ago, you know, they say they want parents, they want a mom and dad or whatever, and they wouldn't consider anything else unless you say, hey, would you consider 2 moms? Well, this CASA was not willing to go there because it was a same-sex couple. So, yeah. And 3 months after Ruby was placed with us, we were checking the website, and these kids were placed back available for adoption, and it just really broke my heart. I think about them all the time.
And we probably did not have the typical experience because we actually did not really encounter any hurdles as far as going through the training with the agency, getting the boy placed with us, anything like that. They even asked him, oh, how would you feel about having 2 dads? And he was like, oh, I'd love to have 2 dads. So probably not the most typical experience, but we really didn't have any problems as far as that went, trying to get our kid.
And I guess, and then question for both of you is, what drew you to do this?
Sorry, I keep handing you this.
He's next.
Yeah. So I have known since 4th grade that I wanted to foster and adopt kids. I had a friend named Irina who was on my baseball team, and then she moved 3 months later, and my dad explained to me that she was a foster kid and got moved somewhere else in Texas. And that's where I learned what the foster care system was. And I thought, that's what I'm gonna do. And I kind of forgot about that until 2003. I got a job at the Austin Children's Shelter, and the older kids stayed a lot longer than the younger kids. And I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get older kids. And then I met my wife, and on the second night that we hung out, I was like, before this goes any further, you need to know that I will not have a baby for you. And I want to adopt from the foster care system. And she was like, oh, great. That's what I always wanted to do, too. So it worked out. Perfect. Yeah.
Awesome. Right? Check.
To be perfectly honest, I never really thought that much about it until I got with my husband, and he has wanted it since he was a child. He's always wanted to adopt a kid. So, you know, I didn't feel strongly one way or the other when we got together, but the more I got to hang around his nieces and nephews and all that, it grew inside of me, like, okay, yes, I want to adopt a kid too. And we never considered doing any type of private adoption because we've always been like, well, there's so many kids in the system. It's a shame to go and get a baby somewhere and pay all this money when, you know, there's hundreds, thousands of kids here that you can just come and, you know, help out in a much better and more productive way.
So Megan, you mentioned getting to learn about
It's the Megan Show.
getting no.
If you know me, you're not surprised.
you're the segue here now, actually, because you mentioned in 2003 or whatever, starting to get to know about the foster care system, and for many people, perhaps we might envision this huge, you know, behemoth of a monster. I wonder if Aaron and Destiny, if you can talk a little bit about. Explain the system and how child placing agencies such as yours, how they fit in and what their role is and how you can facilitate or help people.
Let me start? Go for it. All right. Well, I will say it is a pretty big system. There are 27,000 kids across the state of Texas that are in foster care. So that is a very large, that's like a small town in Texas, essentially. And every single one of those kids needs a home to be in. Sometimes it's a temporary placement, while the bio parents are working to get their kids back, and there are parents out there that love their kids, and they are working really hard. And sometimes those kids need a permanent placement to be someone that will adopt them because their rights have been terminated. They can't go home because of safety situations or because their parents didn't want them. So that's our job as a child placing agency, is to find homes for the children. We train and license homes under state standards and give them the training to care for kids, for traumatized kids, because every child that comes into the system has been impacted by whatever has happened at home. And there's various degrees of that. Some kids have been exposed to things. Some kids have endured a lifetime of abuse. But we train our parents to love these kids no matter what they've experienced, because that's what they need, is a family setting. And they deserve it, because they're kids. They need someone to care for them. That's my little soapbox.
All right, I'll add to that. So I feel like the system is really geared towards providing a very basic level of care for kids. And I think the job of a CPA, a private agency, is to provide a therapeutic level of care. And it's like more of a team approach and really wanting to wrap around and identify issues and be able to help those families find the services that they need and encourage like a dynamic around the child so that we're advocating not only for the child, but also for the family to make sure that they are really getting all those supports necessary. And so I feel like, you know, as you find out those kids' levels of care, the state is really only able to handle a very basic level of care child. And so that's kind of the need for CPAs, is that they can license homes and wrap around them and provide that additional therapeutic support. So, so there.
Can you talk a little bit about what are the biggest areas of need?
So it's pretty unfortunate that there are kids that are hard to place, and I don't even like using air quotes and saying that, you know, but unfortunately, kids that are questioning their sexuality or their gender are harder to place. And so finding families that are open to taking that journey with a child, like just looking at their history and still giving them an opportunity, is a huge need. We just need families that are open to that, because kids are coming into care because of that very issue. And so we need healthy homes that are open to journeying with these kids.
Can you talk, I guess, coming back to the word label again, and going back like to Christopher's story, that he didn't know or didn't self-identify at age 9 that he was gay, but he probably got labeled or as likely being gay at that age. How does, again, and I guess in terms of how does that play out in terms of kids in the system? I mean, does it extend to that young, or like in terms of age or where people are?
I'll probably just start off and say in general, we know that kids are kids.
Right.
And every child needs a loving family. They need people to guide them, to teach them, and to love them. So in general, that's the stance we take of any child that is coming through. That's why I was stressing it, needs a family. They need someone to be there for them. And as they grow older, they need someone to fall back on and be their support. So I'll give that general comment, but I'll probably pass it on to you.
I think that really covers that. I will say this, like, it's unfortunate that in our process, there's like an actual form called a child specification checklist. And on this form is like basically a laundry list of what kids in care will come with a history of, from fire setting to animal cruelty to depression, anxiety, PTSD, STDs. I mean, this list is painful to look at. And I hate that LGBTQ is on that list. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. That should be an assessment that is not part of that list. So there needs to be a shift in that line of thinking to begin with. But yeah, kids are kids, and we just need to find families that are opening to journeying with these children no matter what.
Thanks.
Real quick.
Go ahead.
Because when you made the comment about putting labels on kids, I feel like a lot of kids don't even have a label for themselves, a lot of labels being put on them. And that's, with everything that they have endured in their past, they don't need that additional pressure as well. And they need people that are accepting them for who they are.
They just need to be loved as a kid?
Yes.
Can I add to that a little bit?
If you're
I'm
going
just
to add love,
to.
yes.
I mean, I work for an organization with my lovely friend Anna that is trying to figure out how to support all children who are coming into care. And I love and I hate that you mentioned trauma, because every kid that is coming into the system day one, that's trauma. And a lot of those kids don't have a place to go right away. And when they are put in a group home or they're thrown into a residential treatment center, because that's the only place that can take them, it builds on that trauma. So becoming a foster home that is open to anything is the greatest gift that you can give these kids. And thank you. And so there are studies that show if kids can just go into a loving home for that first 30 days while they're figuring out what's really going on, are they going to go back home or whatever, if we can do that as a community, we are changing the lives of these kids. And so while there is going to continue to be this label of issue of LGBTQ on this form, you as a foster family can say, that's not a problem for me. And when a kid is removed from their home because they identify as gay and their parents want to send them to conversion camp and CPS removes them, they can go to a home that is ready to take them, even though this laundry list says something is wrong with them. They just need a safe place to land. And that it is a reality that that is not something that we can currently do for all of the kids coming into care. That's my plug for becoming a foster family.
Thank you. So in 2017, the Texas legislature passed House Bill 3859, which was the first religious refusal bill, or only religious refusal bill out of 17 that were filed. But it allows child welfare providers, which is a hugely and largely broadly defined term, it basically allows them to discriminate based on personal religious beliefs. And so Denise, I want to ask you as an attorney who represents LGBTQ people and parents, what impact have you seen related to House Bill 3859?
Well, I think part of it is we're here in Central Texas, in Austin, which is pretty darn lucky for us. So fortunately, the majority of my clients have not, sorry, have not had issues with that. They had a lot of fear, though, when the legislature was meeting, and my phone would ring off the hook with families that were in the process of adopting and were very concerned if they were still going to be able to adopt, if the child or children in their home were going to be removed. I think I had a family with Helping Hand that was really, really worried about that. And I mean, I spoke with them really frequently, just kind of to, you know, we're going to get through this. I have backup plans. And we did. In fact, before, we used to, back in the old days, when Texas was even, well, just as backwards, I guess, in some ways as we are now, but in different ways, we were still able to get our same-sex families both adopting. We just had to be creative in how we did it. We had to do it in certain places and not in other places. And so, you know, that was kind of our backup plan. We'll go back to flying under the radar and doing what we did before. All the agencies that are here today, I will tell you, you're lucky that they're here in Central Texas, because these are agencies that have made the process easy for my families and my parents. These are agencies that years ago were making sure that both parents would be able to adopt, didn't charge them. Not one of these agencies here, and they could have charged, when we had to call, we had nothing, didn't know what else to call it then, we called it second parent adoption. Remember? And so it's really kind of silly. I had to file, you know, 2 different cases of the same child, even though someone was married, because Texas wouldn't recognize it, and we would go and do it the same day if we could, depending on the county. Sometimes I had to do one in one county and go into another, and sometimes I could do both. If it's Travis County, it was seamless. But none of these agencies that are here, I want you to know, charge their families any extra to do all the social work that was required for that second parent adoption. So I'm just saying there was always ways to do it, and I would explain this to my families. There's ways to do this. You know, I hope we don't have to, but there's ways. If I can't imagine this child being removed from your home. I'm an attorney. 99.99 is about all I'm going to go percentage-wise, but I still can't imagine that happening, and it didn't. But I think a lot of it is we're super lucky where we are in this state. I work in other communities. I try to stick within a 2 or 3 hour drive from Austin, but I do get further than that, and it's not the same everywhere.
I was going to say, so is it your observation that if we were having this discussion somewhere other than Travis County, might it look different?
It might, and you know, I have a family right now, and I'm trying to think they're a new family, and I'm trying to remember who they're licensed with, but and I just can't. But their county's about an hour away, I'll say that, and they had a horrific experience in court recently. I mean, like a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, where a biological parent shouted horrible things in court about my clients, and why? Because they were gay, and the words used were horrific. I don't know that would have happened in Travis. To the benefit of everyone there, they stopped it. The judge sent the bailiff, who's a big old guy, but I don't see that happening in Austin or some of the counties, you know, right close here. So the further we get from Austin, I kind of see some of this, and you know, who mentioned Houston? Somebody, yeah, that's right. Because, and you guys know, especially Helping Hand for some reason gets a lot of kids out of Harris County. It's better now than it used to be. But I had a case where we had to transfer it, and it took a long time. It was a mandatory transfer. And my clients lived in Caldwell County, which isn't necessarily years ago where you think you'd necessarily want to transfer a case. But they had this child in their home basically from birth, you know, from out of the hospital. It was almost 18 months old now, and rights had finally been terminated, and CPS was now going to look for a real family. And that was the words that were used, a real family. And my clients were fine to foster, but we're talking about adoption now, and it changed the thing. And, you know, when I was first meeting with them, you know, my partner Rob and I were like, you know, you almost can't believe people are saying things like that. And it was true. And, you know, we got it here. We got it down to Caldwell County, which wasn't necessarily, as I said, a county you'd think that, you know, 5 or 6 years ago would have been, and it was a piece of cake. So it's just interesting. You can even go to some metropolitan areas too, but I think we're very lucky to be here. I think our conversation would be very different.
So what are some of the barriers or obstacles that same-sex couples or LGBT people might face in the process, and what recommendations would you give to them?
I'm not seeing with my clients a lot of obstacles right now. My clients, it's interesting because I think everybody talks, knows other families that have fostered or adopted, you know, and through word of mouth, they end up with agencies like you have here today that are incredibly supportive, whether it's in, you know, while it's a legal risk placement, the parental rights haven't been terminated, or it's after that. They're extremely supportive. I'm seeing our judges much more supportive, even in some of our outlying counties. Austin's always been, but even in some of our outlying counties. So I'm not seeing my families that are in the process of fostering and adoption hitting the barriers that they had before, or worrying about things the way they had before. Getting a little further out, like my client that had an unpleasant experience recently, they do have the support of their guardian ad litem, of their attorney ad litem, you know, of their CPS worker, and which they might not have had years ago. So I'm seeing a lot more of that. A lot more of that.
So for our folks with the agencies, I guess one question is, do you operate in other jurisdictions, and have you seen an impact of any change in the law in other places?
Well, I do want to make one quick comment.
Okay, go ahead.
To kind of take a step back from what Denise was saying. Even though there's not too many barriers that you're seeing around here, I have done a lot of info sessions, like providing this information about foster care and adoption to families. And I would say almost every time there is someone that walks up and says, they're fearful, will I be able to adopt? And actually, even in one of our trainings, we had a same-sex couple come up and say they are adoption motivated, and they said, what if the bio parents don't want us to adopt? Like, is that going to ruin our chances? Are we going to be automatically, you know, cut out? And it's a fear that many people have, and I think prevents them from coming through the process. They have the heart, they have desire, but it's the fear of what's going to happen or how they'll be treated in that situation. And
that's why these information sessions like we have here,
Right.
and the ones you're doing around the state are so important, because that we need that education.
right, and
So if we
it is
have
to say
folks
we
here maybe
have-
tonight that are
Yes.
thinking about that
Yeah.
and that they're unsure, what advice or what would you tell folks here that
So-
that might be thinking about
Exactly
it.
like Denise said, we are all here. We support our families. You will have a team surrounding you and providing quality care to a child and love and helping them go through that healing process. You're showing everybody that you are a great parent. And if you have that bonding with the child and it gets to the point, you're going to have people supporting you for that adoption as well.
And again, I mean, as we've said, I think is that perhaps we're fortunate here in Travis County to have so many placing agencies in this community that are open and welcoming. Can you talk a little bit about what could people expect to receive, or what experience might people have in working with the agencies that are here today?
And to add to that point, there are even faith-based organizations that will take you through that process as well. And, you know, I remember having a little bit of anxiety around this House bill because I had to make sure that my boss knew, like, if this goes through and our national office located in Pennsylvania that has conservative roots decides to enforce this, I quit. Like, you understand this is happening, right? And but I was assured that that was not what the Bear Foundation was about. So that was great. But it's, you know, that is very real. Like, just to kind of speak for a second on the faith-based organizations that that will take you through the process. You know, that we have both families, both types of families, straight and gay, who are coming to a faith-based organization for all those right reasons for them. But even within that, I mean, I have straight families who would never take in a child that identifies with this community because of their faith. And so, you know, sometimes, you know, during orientations, we have to make sure that everybody knows, hey, we don't discriminate because it's just wrong. And so we hope that you will take that into your consideration as you're thinking about what you're open to. And so when those people don't return or answer my phone calls afterwards, I'm like, good riddance. Because we need to have a really open and affirming experience all around, so that we set you up as foster parents to be who we need you to be. And one thing I will add is the human, I actually have to look at my little note here. Forgive me. The Human Rights Campaign, their website, they have a ton of webinars that are kind of geared towards taking in LGBTQ youth and for CPAs in creating this very competent work environment, and just helping to change the vernacular around that workspace and around that whole process. And I've found that to be a really great website with just free education in there.
Denise, can you share a story about how parenting made a difference among your clients?
I could share a few, actually. Yeah, it makes, and I know that y'all could do the same thing from the families that you've seen. Actually, I have a Pathways family that from years ago, settlement home family from years ago. And these two wonderful dads had a sibling group out of a county east of Houston that was, well, let's just let me say, when we left there for a hearing, my partner told me I wasn't going to the restroom. We were just going to get in the car and drive, okay? And I'm not joking. It was someplace. And they got these 3 kiddos who had been through some horrific abuse. And I promise you, this would not have been the choice of the biological parents of the family that I think they would have chosen, but these biological parents hadn't made good choices either for these kiddos, or they wouldn't have been, especially the girl who was her stepfather and her biological mother. This girl had been so abused that one of the dads, every night for months and months, slept on the floor outside of her room so she would know she could sleep and she was safe. It was the only way this child could sleep. And it took so much, and they had to even go through some of the therapy where they would hold her, some did the TBRI training, but also would hold her, like she was like a baby again, so she could kind of get that nurturing and bonding. But I mean, incredible. I've had so many families that have done things with children that had been labeled before, which I think is a horrible thing. I agree with these labels, and you've all seen them where they've said some children are unadoptable too, which I think is a horrible thing to put on a child. And it just means maybe they've been more difficult for whoever's been working with them because they maybe weren't the right people working with them. But I've seen children that had that label on them, probably through every one of these agencies here, get into the right home with the right parents. I'm thinking now of one dad that adopted a boy who, when he came with him, was on so much medication that, first of all the labels they had on him were wrong when they got him off of the medication, but he was so medicated that he couldn't stay awake. He would fall asleep, his head would nod down on the table. And the difference in that kiddo, in fact, PBS did a story on this dad and his family a few years ago, the difference in that child and it wasn't easy. I mean, you have a child that's been medicated like that, that's been misdiagnosed, that's been basically shuffled around, but, you get that love and commitment from good parents, and it makes the difference. It's not easy, always, but it makes a difference. And I did want to say one thing, too, is that kids, you always need a parent, doesn't matter how old you are. I do a lot of pro bono adoptions for kids that have aged out of foster care. They're over 18 now, and they still want a family. And they may be being adopted by a former foster family, or they may be being adopted by, one of their friends' families, but they still need a family. And so, for some of these older kids, I encourage you all to keep open to that. I mean, you even said that you were looking for a younger child, and just keep your heart and your home open, because you never stop needing a family. I mean, think even if when you were 18 and, you still wanted a parent to call and everything. These kids need families. So I just encourage everyone to stay open to that.
Thanks. So Aaron and Destiny, are there opportunities for volunteers with your agencies? How about people that this may be their first step in this world?
Yes, if you're not ready to take the full step of being a licensed foster parent or adoptive parent, there are plenty of foster parents that would love your support. Being a babysitter, or a respite provider where you're providing multiple days of care. Volunteering with the agencies, Helping Hand Home has volunteer opportunities at their RTC, correct? There's a bunch of different ways where you can be involved and support families that are currently caring for kids, and also get a feel for what it's like to be a foster parent or adopted parent, and what the kind of process it takes, without having to go full force into it and having a child placed in your home.
Some of the agencies have a little bit different process, but for the most part, that requires choosing an agency or going through Fostering Hope, and being able to do background checks, take an online medication training, CPR, first aid. To become licensed or verified enough to have children in care in your home for a temporary short period of time. So that can be from 1 day to overnight, and the level of requirement just might increase with the amount of time that they spend with you in your home. So it's a huge help to the family, because there are crises, and there are times when our families just need a break, and they need to be in their home and have that break. And so if you build a relationship with a child and have them in your home, and you've met all those requirements with that agency, then everybody can rest assured and know that everybody's maintaining compliance, but at the same time, you're getting to build that relationship with the child and give that family an evening off.
Thank you. So, Dustin and Megan, what last thing would you say to LGBTQ folks who might be here, who might be considering fostering or adopting?
Yeah. So, speaking of labels, you are just a parent. You're not an LGBTQ parent, you are a parent. And looking back, my wife and I realized that we waited too long. And just like having a baby, and you try to wait for the right time, there is never there's never a perfect time. There is always the right time to do this. You will go home and you will think, can we do this now? No, let's wait 6 months. And I will tell you that you are just as ready now as you are in 6 months. And that means that you will find an agency that will get you there. There are few reasons to wait to help a kid out. That's my plug.
And yes,
I mean,
I would say just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to open your heart and your home to these kids, as we've been saying, especially the older kids, because they're the most difficult, once again, the air quotes, just because of their age. Most people want, like I did when I started, 5 and younger or 3 and younger. But don't be afraid to do this, and don't be afraid that you won't be able to because of legal reasons and whatnot, because that was one of the first things me and my husband asked each of these agencies when we went to the informational meeting was, hey, we're a gay couple, is that gonna be a problem? And all of them were like, no, not at all. I mean, like she was saying, it's probably because we're here in Austin, but many of the hurdles that are faced by other LGBTQ parents or adopted and foster parents in the rest of the country, not as much here. And there's some great agencies and great people here to help you out, so just don't be afraid.
And this is probably terrible for my record, but I am almost more excited to work with a gay family because they are not fearful of struggle. They have been through some hard time and some disappointment, and they are more scrappy, and they are more determined, and the fall apart that happens every once in a while is quick to get, pull those boots back up and keep going. So that should definitely be something that it excites you. I would think that that's almost the same for most CPAs.
And I agree with you too. As an attorney, I've seen my families stick with children in difficult situations where I'm not sure every other family would have done so. I totally agree with you.
Thank you all very much for sharing your wisdom with us. I'd like to ask Anna to come up here now, who thank you very much for helping put this all together.
No, thank you, Chuck, Rebecca, Equality Texas, the panel members, and the CPAs that are here. And I want to challenge everyone before I, say goodnight. Everyone in this room can support a child in foster care. Not everyone can foster. We know that. It's a big ask. I've been thinking about it for 16 years. But I'm doing it this year. But you can be a babysitter. You can be a mentor. There's so many things you can do. So hopefully before you leave, you'll go and talk to Rebecca and Equality Texas, the child placing agencies. Maybe you're not ready to foster right now, but maybe you know someone that has been thinking about it and that will make a great parent. You may want to remind them, you know what, you will make a great adopted parent. Get that information, and they're here because they do think that LGBTQ parents make exceptional good foster parents and adoptive. I keep hearing that. That's why I had to have an event here. So thank you, and please get some food because I don't want to take everything with me too.
Right. So yeah, I was just gonna say is get some more food, and please don't leave without checking out the resources. We have fabulous resources in the room, and again, wherever you might be, or at whatever your level of interest might be, take a few minutes and learn more about what opportunities might exist and what might fit what you're looking to do and how you might help.
Hey, Chuck. I would also offer that I bet all 5 of us are happy to answer questions.
Yes.
If you want to, commandeer us for a little bit.
One-on-ones available at the front. So, yes. Wisdom, and food. Help yourself. Thank you so much for being here.